Lang's book, Self and Other. This is chapter 1, Fantasy and Experience. In a rough and ready way of acts and experiences, in memory, in dreams, in imagination and in reality. Some psychoanalysts propose that we can also talk about experiences in unconscious fantasy. But is unconscious fantasy a mode or a type of experience? But is unconscious fantasy a mode or a type of experience? If it is with a difference. If not, what is it, if not a figment of imagination? Psychoanalytic thesis can be stated thus: it is not possible to prove the existence of unconscious fantasy to the person who is immersed in it. Unconscious fantasy can be known to be fantasy only after the person's own emergence from it. This way of putting it is riddled with difficulties, and so is every other way. The situation is not assisted by the fact that the concept of unconscious fantasy has received very little scrutiny from an existential and phenomenological perspective. Yet no comprehensive account of human relations can ignore it. Paper by Susan Isaacs, 1952, on the nature and function of fantasy, provides a convenient starting point. I choose to begin with this version of the psychoanalytic theory of fantasy because it remains an influential study that has not been superseded, and because Isaacs seems to regard fantasy as, among other things, a mode of experience. Essex states that she is mostly concerned with the definition of fantasy. That is to say, with describing the series of facts which the use of the term helps us to identify, to organize, and to relate to other significant facts. She summarizes her argument as follows. 1. Fantasy has gradually widened in psychoanalytic thought. It now requires clarification and explicit expansion in order to integrate all the relevant facts. 2. Developed. A. Fantasies are the primary content of unconscious mental processes. B. Unconscious fantasies are primarily about bodies and represent instinctual aims towards objects. Fantasies are, in the first instance, the psychic representatives of libidinal and destructive instincts. Early in development, they also become elaborated into defenses, as well as wish fulfillments and anxiety contents. Freud's postulated hallucinatory wish fulfillment and his primary identification, introjection and projection, are the basis of the fantasy life. Though through external experience, will experience. Fantasies become elaborated and capable of expression, but they do not depend upon such experience for their existence. Fantasies are not dependent upon words, although they may, under certain conditions, be capable of expression in words. Fantasies are experienced as sensations. Later they take the form of plastic images and dramatic representations. Fantasies have both psychic and bodily effects. For example, inconversion symptoms, bodily qualities, character and personality. Neurotic symptoms, inhibitions, and sublimations. I can remember where we are here. We're reading R.D. Laing's Self and Other. This is the first chapter. Fantasy and Experience. Now he's summarizing the argument of Susan Isaacs about fantasy. One interesting thing about this text is that the word fantasy is spelled with the PH. Kind of a typographical thing that as the person reading, I feel I should tell you. Okay. We'll try this. Unconscious fantasies form the operative link between instincts and mechanism. When studied in detail, every variety of ego mechanism can be seen to arise from specific sorts of fantasy, which in the last resort have their origin in instinctual impulses. The ego is a differentiated part of the id. Mechanism is an abstract general term describing certain mental processes which are experienced by the subject as unconscious fantasies. J. Adaptation to reality and reality thinking require the support of concurrent unconscious fantasies. Observation of the ways in which knowledge of the external world develops shows how the child's fantasy contributes to his learning. Conscious fantasies exert a continuous influence throughout life, both in normal and neurotic people. The difference is lying in the specific character of the dominant fantasies, the desire or anxiety associated with them, and their interplay with each other. And with external reality, fantasy is intended to point to a series of facts. What is the domain of this series of facts? Are they facts of experience? Of my experience? Of your experience? Of my experience of you, but not of your experience of yourself? Are they facts not of my experience, but inferred from facts of my experience. By me, about me, by me, about you. Does their dynamic lie anywhere in the experience of self and other, or outside all experience, albeit inferred from it? Fantasies are experienced as dramatic representations. What does this mean? Can dramatic representations be represented by fantasy? Whose and by whom? Isaac's paper is mainly concerned with inferences by self about other. In my experience, self does not experience the experience of the other directly. About other available to self are actions of other experienced by self. The facts about other available to self are actions of other experienced by self. The facts about other available to self are actions of other experienced by self. Perspective of self-seeing other, Isaacs infers from her experience of the other's actions certain things about the other's experience. An adult infers what a baby experiences. The baby does not tell us. The adult infers from the baby's behavior that the baby's experience of a situation common to the adult and the baby is the same as or different from the adult's experience of the same situation. Isaacs states our views about fantasy in these earliest years are based wholly upon inference. But then this is true at any age. Unconscious fantasies are always inferred, not observed as such. The technique of psychoanalysis as a whole is largely based upon inferred knowledge. Page 69. they appear to have no option but to maintain that self's knowledge of others' experience, of any kind, conscious or unconscious, is based at any age of self or other entirely upon inference. As Isaacs states firmly in the second sentence above about unconscious fantasy. And see that second sentence. I hope you don't mind. Oh dear, it's a big long thing. All that stuff I read before. Anyway, I think it's a little gullible of them to just casually refer to her second sentence when her second sentence is like, 2 pages long, but we'll give him that one. Since to Isaac's fantasies are inner, mental events, only one's own fantasies are directly available to self. They can only be inferred by the other. The idea that the mind, the unconscious or fantasy, is located inside a person and, in that sense, is inaccessible to the other, has far-reaching effects on the whole of psychoanalytic theory and method. Isaacs, in referring not simply to imagination, daydreams, or reveries, but to unconscious fantasy, is making 2 types of inference from her position as the own person. Namely, she is inferring something about the other's experience, and she is inferring that this is something of which the other is unaware. This seems to mean that there is a whole type of experience, as well as specific content of experience, of which the other who has the imputed experience knows or may know nothing. From her premises, corroboration of herself's inferences, From her premises, corroboration of herself's inferences by explicit testimony from other is not necessary to confirm these particular inferences. self is the analyst, and the other the analyzed. The own person states the personality, the attitudes and intentions, even the external characteristics and the sex of the analyst, as seen and felt in the patient's mind, change from day to day, even from moment to moment, according to changes in the inner life of the patient, whether these are brought about by the analyses, comments, or by outside happenings. To say, the patient's relation to his analyst is almost entirely one of unconscious fantasy. Person infers from the other's behavior that the other's behavior has a meaning to which the other is blind, and in that sense the other cannot see or realize what the other's actions are implying. The analyst then says, distinguish two usages of unconscious. First, the term unconscious may refer to dynamic structures, functions, mechanisms, processes that are meant to explain a person's actions or experiences. Such structures, functions, mechanisms, or processes are outside experience, but are used to explain experience. Whether called conscious or unconscious. These concepts lie outside experience, but start from inferences about experience. Inferences are incorrect. Everything built upon them is completely wrong. signifying that the user of the term is claiming that he or the other is unaware of part of his own experience, despite the apparent absurdity of this claim. What is the experiential status of unconscious fantasy, as Isaacs uses this term? Isaacs, time and again, states that unconscious fantasy is an experience. We got about one more page. We can do this. We can make this. All right. R.D. Laing, Self and Others. Chapter 1, Fantasy and Experience. But fantasy is spelled with a PH. Isaacs talking again for a minute here. Most of this page, actually. A mechanism is an abstract general term describing certain mental processes which are experienced by the subject as unconscious fantasies. Fantasy is, in the first instance, the mental corollary, the psychic representative of instinct. There is no impulse, no instinctual urge or response which is not experienced as unconscious fantasy. On the basis of those principles of observation and interpretation, which have already been described and are well established by psychoanalytic work, we are able to conclude that when the child shows his desire for his mother's breast, he experiences this desire as a specific fantasy. I want to suck the nipple. If desire is very intense, perhaps on account of anxiety, he is likely to feel, I want to eat her all up. Unconscious fantasy is a way of experiencing our desires which plays a part in our personal relations. throughout life. So that was R.D. Laing's Self and Others. The first part of the first chapter is what we heard, and thank you very much for listening. And perhaps I'll continue forward with this book another time. Okay.